Hey, how's everybody doing today? Thanks a lot for joining us and taking some time. We're going to go through this presentation, and we'll try not to take up too much of your time. Once again, my name's Mark Klemecki with Point HR, and I'm joined here by Jim Castor. Say hello, Jim.
Morning, everybody.
There's a picture of my shiny head, so that way you can put a face to the name as well as Jim there. So we're going to talk a little bit about background checks. We've been doing background checks for over 20 years, for a very long time, so we've definitely seen things come and go, and there's been a lot of changes, and there's always a lot of changes. It's not something that's static. It's a very dynamic piece of the HR problem that's out there. A quick Google search will show you in the screen cap here that there's over almost 1 million news articles on Google referencing background checks. There's all kinds of different aspects of the problem. There's liability, cost, compliance, legislation, safety, negligence. I mean, there are just all kinds of things that can go wrong with a background check. Here's some stories from just recently in the last couple months. Employers really get it on both sides. Not only do they have to be careful with their due diligence and making sure that they're not negligently hiring employees, people with criminal records, people that are potentially dangerous or have records, but they also have to make sure that they're doing them right, that they're not discriminating against people, that they're not breaking compliance laws, with the federal government and different state and local laws as well. So it's definitely a big area of consternation for many HR people out there. By the numbers, here's some quick numbers for you, kind of illustrating some of the things going on in the background check arena. 1 out of 4 job seekers have a record. That's actually a number that's gone up quite a bit in the past 5 years. 90% of 92% to be exact of companies are doing background checks now, and that's a number that's gone up quite a bit in the last 10 years. I can remember when it was less than half of companies that were doing background checks, and now just about every company is doing a background check. There's been a 35% increase in FCRA lawsuits in the past year, and your average settlement for a negligent hiring lawsuit is about $1 million. So with that many companies doing background checks and that many lawsuits going on and that many people with criminal records, it's a good bet that, if you're doing background checks and you're doing a fair amount of them, that you might run into some problems at some point with a applicant and a criminal record and maybe, possible legal action. So it's good to be on sure footing with what you're doing and what your policy is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what a criminal background check consists of, what a background check is. I know this is probably old school knowledge for a lot of you, but just to make sure that we know and kind of take you through the process. So what we like to say is that all criminal justice starts at the county level. And what that means is, if you get arrested, if something happens, your local police officer is going to get involved. It's a domestic violence, the DUI, something like that happens. You're going to have an interface with your local police officer, and they're going to issue you a summons or a citation to make an appearance in your local courthouse. That's going to be your county courthouse. That's where felony, misdemeanor, traffic, infractions, different things are taken care of, and that's where your case starts at. Most criminal background checks, they'll return felony and misdemeanor records. A felony record is generally a crime that's punishable by more than 1 year in jail. Misdemeanor is a crime that's punished by less than 1 year in jail, so that's less severe than a felony, but sometimes it's different, but usually as a rule of thumb, that's what differentiates felonies and misdemeanors. And every case starts out at the local county courthouse. In every state, there's multiple counties. For instance, in Texas, we have 254 counties, and each one of those 254 counties keeps your case record right there in the courthouse. Now, what they're supposed to do is report that information to the state repository, so that way it can be accessed by different agencies. There's a lot of different varying software systems and information systems, ranging from a file cabinet with paper, copies of things in it, which is a lot more common than you would think, to fully automated and real-time online systems that courthouses have. So that reporting period, it could be a month, it could be a week, it could be maybe at all, not at all. I think that here in Texas, I think they estimate there's about 60% of all possible criminal records are there in the state repository. So it's definitely the best option to go ahead and start your criminal background check there at the local level. That's where the most current information is. That's where you can go in and get information that's 100% accurate and 100% up to date 100% of the time. So that goes on all in every state and every courthouse across the country. In the United States, there's 3,144 counties. What we do is, we have, depending on what the state is and what the system is in that courthouse, we have people in every state and every county courthouse that go out to that courthouse every day to get those records for us. So if you have an applicant that's lived in, South Dakota, Texas, New Jersey, we have people in all those states that go out to each one of those county courthouses and get those records so we can make sure that, everything is up to date, that it's compliant, that all the information is 100% correct. Another wrinkle to that is all those county courthouses and all those state repositories, they're supposed to be reporting that information to the National Crime Information Center, the FBI. I don't know any of you guys go ahead and vote in on this poll here. Does anybody do any fingerprint checking on criminal records? I know it's mandated by a lot of different states for positionings that require, licensing or sometimes child care. Fingerprints are kind of seen as the gold standard in background checks, but the truth is that the National Crime Information Center that's run by the FBI, only about 50% of those cases contain information that have actual conviction information in it. And then cases that fingerprints don't get taken on, that are perhaps like minor cases, infractions, DUIs, things like that, where you might get cited and released. Those cases don't even make it in the system at all. So there's also long turnaround times, high costs, a lot of issues with fingerprints. I'm sure if anybody here has done a fingerprint search before in the past, they know how long that could take and how expensive that is. All right, so we do have a couple people that have done fingerprint searches. It's really tough, and it's really not feasible in a large organization where speed is key to do those fingerprint searches, and a lot of times they're not accessible to the general public either. So that brings us to what's become a big trend, in the last 5 or 6 years out there is the nationwide background check. I'm sure you've been on the internet. You've probably seen plenty of ads and pay-per-clicks for, background checks that are $9.99 or $14.99, do an instant background check. Go ahead, log in here. Maybe they even, have a banner where it's for free, and they, kind of pull you in there. And then once you put in your, worker's name, they, try to upsell you to some other price. Generally, you get what you pay for, and if something's free, there's no free lunch for sure. Those searches, aren't FCRA compliant, and we're going to talk about the FCRA here in a little bit, but they're not compliant for employment purposes. They're not accurate. The information that you're getting, if any information at all, is going to be dated. It's going to be incomplete. Really, that's the best thing to do is just stay away from sites like that. You want to make sure that you're using a reputable company that does things the right way. And we're going to go through some packages a little bit later on in the presentation, but you want to make sure that you're getting a full and complete package and look at a background check, not just a fast and free, database search that, could be 10, 15 years old, the data that you're getting. And also the background check is more than just a criminal report nowadays. It contains a lot of different other aspects, employment and education verifications, being one of the most important ones. You see some of the percentages here. You could see that, a lot of people are embellishing their resumes. I don't want to say it's, fraudulent or that they're lying, but they very well could be, especially with, LinkedIn. Everybody's getting their information from LinkedIn for people's, employment histories and stuff, and you can go in there and put whatever you want, and none of that information is verified by anybody. So it's very important that when you're hiring somebody that you're going in there, you're checking their employment references, you're checking their personal references, you're checking their education references, making sure that they have the degrees that they have, making sure that they work the positions that they say that they worked on. You can see here 34% of people, didn't put in the correct job title, on their resume, which is huge, So you could say that you're the CIO and maybe you work in, tech support or something like that. So you really can't take anybody's resume on face value anymore. So it's definitely important that you go ahead and do those. Also on the other side, with going outbound from your company, automated work verifications, which is something that we do at Point HR to assist companies with, helping do inbound and outbound instant work verifications. It's real important that you're making sure what information is going out, what information you're verifying to people calling in on your employees to make sure that you're not liable for anything like that. There's several states that have some laws in place protecting employees from putting out the wrong information or giving out too much information on work verifications. I think Michigan is one of them. Dominion's in Michigan, so I bring that up. But if those aren't one of your states, then you have to be very careful about what information you're sending out about your applicants. Some other aspects of the background check that are powerful, driving records. If you have anybody that's driving a company vehicle or driving on company time, you want to make sure that their driving record, their motor vehicle report is clean. They don't have speeding tickets. They don't have DUIs. They don't have accidents, because you are liable for anything that they do when they're behind the wheel of a company vehicle. And also for insurance, a lot of times those motor vehicle reports are required. Should do those annually, make sure that everybody's driving record is clean, because things do happen. Just because you do one when somebody gets hired doesn't necessarily mean it won't change 6 months, 8 months, 12 months down the road. So that's something you want to keep tabs on and keep current. Credit reports, especially for financial positions. If you're hiring a CFO, an accountant, a bookkeeper, something like that, if they don't keep their financial house in order, you can't really expect them to do a great job with yours. Now, credit reports are one of those things that are also highly regulated. You need to make sure that in your state that it's legal for you to use those reports. 99.9% of the time, if you have somebody that's dealing with money, it's fine to go ahead and request a credit report on them. But if you're doing it for entry-level people or something, there's a lot of states where they have problems with that. Drug testing is another big issue with the legalization of marijuana. In how many states is marijuana legal in now, Jim?
Well, they've got medical marijuana in, I think, 29 states, and they have passed recreational amendments as well in 9 more.
Yeah, Jim's kind of our resident expert on drug testing and drug testing laws, but there's a lot of gray area in that, and if you haven't addressed that in your current drug testing policy, you might want to look at having some marijuana-free drug testing out there, because a lot of times when that stuff comes back, since there's different state laws and different things going on with the medical review officers and the way that they clear those results, because there's really no prescriptions for marijuana. In some, in a state like California or Colorado, you're really best, kind of just leaving that off and just going with your illicit drugs, your cocaines and opiates and amphetamines and things of that nature. But drug testing, is a huge area of liability and exposure that's coming up in terms of drug testing. Civil records, that's something else you can do, especially if you're, getting into a business relationship with somebody. You want to check, make sure they don't have any judgments against them. Work assessments, something else that we do here at Point HR. You want to, when you're hiring somebody, it's making sure that they're more than just, don't have any criminal records or that their resume is good. You want to make sure that they can do the job that they're applying for. So, assessments involving, math skills and accounting skills for accountants, data entry skills for data entry people. That's part of the background check process as well. These are all things that you want to do before somebody starts on their first day of work to make sure that they're qualified for the job. So we're going to go ahead and get into some more of the technical issues here. We're going to talk about the FCRA, the EEOC, and state and local laws governing background checks. This is really where there's the most area of movement at, on a day-to-day basis. The FCRA is fairly static. There hasn't been a lot of changes in that. What's changed is the enforcement of it. There's been a lot of lawsuits recently that's come into play. Some of those slides that I showed you earlier, there's some FCRA lawsuits, against Dollar General, Home Depot, FedEx, some real big brands. The EEOC lawsuits are something that started relatively recently, big lawsuits with big settlements from them against BMW and Pepsi, and some small companies as well. It's just not these giant Fortune 500 companies. And then state and local laws, we're not going to go through every state and every municipality, of course. We'll hit some of the bigger ones and kind of, guideline some of the trends that are going on and what you should watch out for. So we're going to talk a little bit about the FCRA to start out with. And really what the FCRA does is it mandates the way that you should handle background checks and credit reports for your new hires and the things that you have to do with that information after you get it. And there's a pretty simple set of rules that go along with the FCRA. And it's just about keeping your employee in the loop. What the federal government doesn't want you to do is request a background check on somebody, not tell them that you requested it, look at those results, make judgments and actions based on those results, and then not hire that person and just leave that person in the dark. They didn't get the job. They had no idea that you did a background check on them. They had no idea that records came back. They had no idea that you took, adverse action on them, even though, based on those records. And they never got the job, and then they got left out in the cold. So first thing they want you to do, they want you to disclose to the applicant that you're doing a background check on them and get written authorization to do that background check before you do it. So we have standard releases here that we provide to our clients. If you don't have a Fair Credit Report, Fair Credit Reporting Act release from your background check vendor, that's definitely a red flag. You should have a release, and the disclosure and the release can be on one piece of paper. You should have one of those on everybody that you do a background check on. Next, after that background check is complete, if you get results back that are disparaging and you're going to take adverse action based on those results, what you're going to do is go ahead and let your person know, and that's called a pre-adverse action letter. And basically, you give it to your applicant along with a copy of their background check report and say, hey, we did this background check on you. We might take action on this. We might not, depending on, what we decide here. But here's the information. The Federal Trade Commission put a number of 5 days on there. They want you to give 5 days to the applicant to go ahead and look over that information and get back with you if they think something on there may not be right. What could that be? It could be something like a disposition. Maybe the report you got back said they were convicted of something, and in reality it was dismissed, or they did some kind of diversion program and that should have been removed from the record. Those are the kind of problems you're going to get with those database instant products, where the information may not be up to date 100% because they could go to the court, have some kind of conviction, do a some kind of rehabilitation program, some kind of probation program, go back to the court after it's done, and then get that conviction removed from the record. Unfortunately, it's been reported to a database or reported to a state repository at that point, and that information's kind of already gotten out there, and now it hasn't been updated, and it's not 100% correct. If you deny employment based on that, then you could get in trouble because in actuality they weren't convicted of that. And in a lot of states, you can only make adverse action, take adverse action on an applicant based on a conviction, not on anything that's dismissed or expunged or anything like that. So they get a chance to challenge that information. In our case, on our reports, our name and our address and instructions for doing that are right there on our report, so they would contact us. We'd look into it if they say it wasn't correct. update the report if that was a necessity, provide it back to the client, let them know, and then they would receive an updated report, and they can make a new decision based on that. If you ultimately decide not to hire that person, then you must provide, a final adverse action notice to them saying, hey, we're not going to give you the job based on this. Again, we have tools in our system that provide those for employers to where they can go ahead and send those out to their applicants so they can stay compliant in the process and let them know everything that's going on. The next one is the Equal Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. This is another federal agency that came on strong a few years back for background check enforcement. Their main problem here is that they think that criminal background checks can be applied in a way that is discriminatory to candidates, and they want to make sure that nobody's discriminated against. They also have a stake in reducing recidivism amongst convicts, trying to get people jobs. So they put some high-profile lawsuits out there, like I said, BMW, probably being the biggest one, cost BMW several $1 million. What they want to see is that you're not just making a blanket statement across your whole organization saying, hey, we don't hire anybody with a misdemeanor conviction. They want to see you actually looking at those records and comparing those records to the position that your applicant is applying for, not just having a blanket statement. So if they have a DUI and they're going to be in the back stocking shelves, they're going to want you to give that person a second chance and say, okay, he had a DUI, but that's really not going to affect, how good, he could put these cans on the shelf at the grocery store, But if he was driving the delivery vehicle for the same store, then it might be a problem. Same deal if somebody was, charged with embezzlement and they're going to be, outside, painting a house, okay, well, they're not going to have access to any cash. So it's probably all right, to put them in this low-level position rather than, applying for the bookkeeper position. So they want to see if the crime, kind of eliminates them from the position in question. Like I said, they want to see, people get a second chance. They don't want, people just summarily being dismissed from positions just based on their criminal actions. This is something that a lot of states are running with as well, as we're going to see here with California and New York and all the different ban-the-box states and cities that are coming up. California is interesting. I highlight California because it's probably one of the hardest places to do background checks in, and do criminal checks and stay above the board. Do we have any current people on the call that hire anybody in New York or California, or have any offices in New York or California, or maybe both? I'll leave this up here for a couple minutes and let you guys click in. But in California, they have what's known as the ICRAA, or IRCA as they call it, and it's the Investigative Criminal Report Act, and basically it mandates what you can return back on a criminal background check. In California, basically you can't consider anything that didn't result in a conviction. So there's no anything that's deferred, probation, dismissed, all that kind of stuff. It has to be a conviction for you to be able to consider it in California. And another tricky thing is, and this is for jobs in California. So if you're, hiring somebody and, maybe they lived in Texas and, when your office is in California, you do a Texas criminal check. Well, even though those records are from Texas, you still have to apply the California laws to them. So it's not just court records that come from California. It could be court records from anywhere. It's actually where that person's getting the job at. It also limits the use of credit reports on people. Highly limits the use of convictions for marijuana to where marijuana convictions can't be considered. All right, so we have somebody in New York, it looks like here, so that's good. But most of you are neither. But like I said, these are real population centers, and it's more than just having offices there or having employees there. These are trends that are really kind of following on to the whole country. Like I said, credit reports only on selected employees. Those marijuana convictions, you can only use a conviction from the last 2 years. And now that marijuana is quote unquote, regulated or legalized in California, they might even be changing that as well. They have an expanded release that if you have a company or a location in California where you need to go ahead and add some different verbiage to your background check release, letting them have a box there to check to receive a copy of their background check regardless of the results. In New York, they passed some laws recently. One of them is called the Fair Chance Act. Another one is called Article 23-A. The Fair Chance Act is for New York City, and then the other one is for the entire state. And it mandates some specific things that you have to do if you deny somebody employment based on the results of their criminal background checks. Basically, you have to go ahead and have an interview with that person, give them a chance to explain why they should hire, what are the instances surrounding, their conviction, if they had any rehabilitation, and then you have to document, exactly what criteria you used to deny them employment, maintain that documentation on file for 5 years. So it's just more paperwork for sure. The Fair Chance Act in California, in New York City, bans your job ads or anything from saying that they can't have a criminal record or that they must pass a background check. You can't ask any questions about criminal history on your job application. You can't ask any questions about criminal history during job interviews. And you can only do a background check after a conditional offer of employment is extended. And that's something important, and that's a real trend kind of going on across the nation is these local states and municipalities, they don't want you to do any background checks until you're actually in the hiring process. So until that offer of employment is extended, that's something they don't want you to go ahead and do until actually you've selected somebody from your applicant pool and you've started them in the process to hire them. I have a graphic here, and I think this has actually changed in the last couple months. I think we're actually up to 23 states, but there's 23 states that have a ban-the-box policy in place. I don't know if any of you guys actually do. Anybody on the call here still have a question on their job application asking about criminal convictions, if they have any convictions or if they've been convicted of a felony or anything like that? If you can go ahead and vote, that'd be great. But big trend here is, ban the box. They don't want anybody asking about any criminal convictions before an offer is extended. They don't want that on the application. They don't want you putting that on your online job ads. They don't want you asking about that at all. Let's see if we have any results here. So we have a number of people that are still asking that question. So this is going to be interesting. For those people here, here's a complete list of all the cities and states. There's 150 cities and counties and then 23 states that have something on the line. So see if you can find where you're at on that list. And if you're on that list right there, I would go ahead and take that question off your application immediately. And pretty much for everybody, that's just something you don't want to ask anymore because, like I said, this is really turned into a nationwide movement, and sooner or later it's going to be something that's, in somewhere that you're hiring. So you definitely don't want to have any kind of lawsuits or any kind of action come your way based on asking about criminal convictions on your job application. Usually in each of these counties and cities and states, they have some kind of provision saying you can ask about it, if you're hiring for a position where it's mandated like a state or county or police law enforcement role or something like that. But kind of the trend going forward is that's something you definitely want to remove off your application. So let's talk a little bit about breakthroughs that have come down the pike in the last couple years. And actually getting background checks done. So as everybody knows, fast is where it's at. Everybody wants everything done now. Sending somebody to the local county courthouse is great. But if you're sending somebody to a court in parish in Louisiana, it might take 2 or 3 days to get a background check done because it's got to be assisted by the clerk, and they're still on a paper filing system, and it's real tough, and everybody wants to get that information as soon as possible. So that's where instant automated records come into play. That's something that we feature heavily in our system. We've done a lot of investment in technology over the last few years. One of the biggest places of additional technology investment and speed and savings that we've really leveraged is automated technology. So at this point, not only does it increase speed, but it also increases accuracy. When we talk about automated background checks, what do we mean exactly? Well, we talked a little bit earlier about how records are stored at the county courthouses. I think the latest stat is about 1,500, almost half of the county courthouses actually have data systems where that information is accessible through the internet, where the system that the clerk uses is updated in real time as the records are put in the court. They go right into their database. We actually have, robots sounds like a strange term, but they are robots. They're, using artificial intelligence. You can actually set up systems to go ahead and query those databases in the county courthouses to bring back the information in real time, which is just the same as actually being there physically in the courthouse and using the data terminals in the courthouse to access that information. It's faster. We don't have to have a human do it anymore. It's more accurate because we don't have to worry about, errors, occurring from, typos and human interface errors, where maybe something's spelled backwards, or they transpose the first name, last name, or miss a digit on the date of birth or something like that. So we do that, like I said, in over 1,500 courthouses. 44 state motor vehicle departments are directly hooked into Point HR to where we can get those driving records for drivers instantaneously. Federal criminal courthouses, we can do those as well, tied in right into federal criminal courthouses. I know we didn't talk about the federal court system, but the federal court system also has a whole system of courts as well. Those crimes are, mail fraud, things that happen across state lines, crimes that are handled by the FBI, but those are also able to be indexed instantaneously. So all this automated data extraction takes place in real time. Not only, like I said, does it save time, but it also saves money with less people and less time in it. Of course, it's able to get cheaper. Have a case study here about one of our clients that was doing a manual background check, taking 2 or 3 days to return. Using some of our data extraction solutions, brought their average turn time down to around 26 minutes to where that was happening real quick. Cost reductions, time savings, had a 2.5 times return on their investment from really going all in to our automated data solutions, saving them time from their current vendor and money from their current vendor. So if your current background check vendor isn't really heavily leveraged into automation and getting that information and being tied right into the courthouses and the MVRs and the federal courthouse or in the federal records as well, that's something you need to look into. You could really save a lot of time and a lot of money. Here's some sample packages of background checks that you can do that can be returned very quickly, same day in a lot of cases. Social Security traces, that's where you use somebody's Social Security number to assess their identity and as well as their address history, so that way you know exactly where to look at those criminal records. Nationwide criminal database search. We have a nationwide database of over 1 billion records that we keep in-house, and a sex offender list. So all that information there can be returned instantly at the time of request, comes right back. If there's any records in the instant database, we go ahead and we verify those records to make sure that information is 100% complete and compliant with the FCRA and state and local laws. Got another one here with terrorist watch lists and county courthouse check, so that way you can actually get that live information through one of our automated robots from the courthouse to make sure that, up to date, up to that day, that you have information on your applicant. And then this third package here also includes one of those instant motor vehicle searches where you can add the motor vehicle report, get back any infractions, accidents, DUIs, all that kind of stuff, instantly indexed through the state motor vehicle department to get all that information back. So another big area of improvement recently has been applicant tracking systems. Anybody here use an applicant tracking system like Oracle or SAP or Taleo perhaps? You can go ahead and order that, answer that question there. But that's been a huge area of time savings, automating the application process so that way you don't have a paper application. You can use that information that the applicant puts in on themselves through your online job application to send out right to your vendor. So that way there's no data, no double data entry. That's kind of hard to say, double data entry. But send over that social security number securely, that name, that date of birth, all that information that's required for the background check. So that way it can take place in real time. Let's say about 50-50 on the ATS. If you're not, that's something else that's built into our system here at Point HR. We have an ATS that's built into our system where you can order background checks straight from our system on our ATS, as well as post your job ads out to several online advertisers like Indeed, so that way you can keep all your applicants and all the background check results and everything right there in one system, so it's easily accessible. And again, there's no data entry errors. Everything's in there, goes system to system. We have APIs with several different ATS service vendors, so that way you can request background checks and motor vehicles and drug screening and all our products straight from your applicant tracking system. So that's another thing you want to look for. If your current vendor that you're requesting background checks from isn't heavily leveraged into technology and automating that through an ATS or an HRIS, you can save some time, you could save some money by finding a vendor that can help you in that area of getting integrated with your current software system. Another piece of technology that's on the grow that we're heavily leveraged into is mobile and SMS text. I'm sure, as you know, email's real tough nowadays. You send an applicant an email, they may not respond. You're trying to set up an interview via email. They don't show up. We found that text messages are very penetrating. So on all our products, background checks, I-9s, drug testing, everything, we get that applicant's phone number. We communicate with them via text. As you can see here, 9 out of 10 job seekers are filling out applications on a mobile device, and that this is dated information from last year, so it might even be higher now. But just about everybody in the country, has some kind of smartphone, has some kind of mobile device. That's where you need to go if your job application's not online and not mobile. If you're doing paper releases that aren't online and they're not mobile, you really need to find a vendor out there that's embracing technology and using these mobile technologies to make the process easier for you to deliver those background check results and those adverse action notices for compliance out via text, notifying your employees via text of these things. So that way, everybody's kept in the loop and everything's instant, and everything's taking place in real time, because it's definitely tough, trying to get people to fill things out via email, because 9 times out of 10, they don't even see the emails anymore. They're in a spam folder, or they're, coming in at some strange, time period. I know we work with a lot of, 20-something, millennials, and they don't even really have email addresses anymore. Everything's through the phone, everything's through text. They don't have a laptop, they're doing everything on an iPhone or an iPad. So it's definitely changing, and you need to embrace that change in technology to make sure you stay current and competitive. Because I think the latest unemployment rate, what was the latest unemployment rate, Jim? Was it around 4%?
Yeah, close to that. Kind of depends on who you talk to, but but probably a real employable rate is about 4%.
Yeah, I think we're about near capacity on employment. So right now, I mean, it's really tough finding applicants, and you don't want to scare them away by your background check process being slow or cumbersome. I know some of our competitors send out PDF forms that need to be signed and scanned back in and emailed back, and this represents your corporate culture, and you want your background check process to be as technologically advanced and slick as your company is, and a lot of times this process is the first thing the applicant sees when they're coming on board your company. So making a good impression, through your screening vendor is as important as what's on your job application and what's in your training manual and all that kind of stuff. So the trend is getting back your screening and getting back your background checks in hours now, not days. That's really what Point HR focuses on. I can tell you a little bit about our company now and just kind of how we operate. Our whole main premise is protection. We're here to protect you. Background checks that are on point. Our tagline is "Proceed with confidence." We've been in business for a very long time, since 2002, and then even before that, me and Jim were with another company doing the same thing. We've seen all the trends come and go. We really know. At our core, we have a lot of different software products, but at our core, background checks is really what we're the most proficient in, and we speak that language and really know how to do that, and we've really stayed on point with the technological advances to get that stuff done. I know I went through those slides pretty fast, Jim. Did I miss out on anything?
No, it was a great shot of the background check and the employment screening world in general. The background checks are a bit volatile, with everything that's out there. Because on one hand, you need to protect your workforce. On the other hand, you need to protect the civil rights of the person that's applying for the job. That's where the ban the box and all of the FCRA came from. Back when this all started, when we first started into background checks and things like that, there was no FCRA to speak of to govern the process. It was a bit of the wild, wild west out there. Companies would absolutely screen based on their application. That ban the box, the reason it's around is because companies will ask, hey, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And if they say yes, then that goes in the circular file. Great. Don't need to worry about that one.
Looks like we have a question there about the ban the box. It says, does the movement get a lot of resistance from job employers?
Sure. Yeah, because it helps you, on the positive side of the checkbox on there. It helps you screen your potential employees right off the bat. The problem with it is that you're not quite sure what you're screening them out for. It may be a dismissed case. It may be something that's irrelevant. When the question's asked, some companies have you ever been convicted of a felony? And maybe this felony took place 20 years ago. We've certainly seen that in the background check and the screening world. That when we do a background check, some courts will report everything that they have, and it could be we've had them in Dallas back to 1975. And it's part of what we bring to the table. Part of what you have to be insistent on in your background screening program is to be legal and consistent with every single employee that applies, kind of err on the side of caution, and to follow the FCRA and the rules to the letter of the law. What sometimes is most important is what you don't see. What you don't want is your judgment to be colored for a particular applicant or candidate for a position based on information that you legally can't use. And what we bring to the table a lot of times is that filter to where, you know, we place a governor on it to where you can only receive back the information that's compliant with the Fair Credit Reporting Act and with the various state laws. So it's difficult to keep up on here and everywhere. Certainly for, you know, the standard person in HR that has, you know, 10 million things to do besides the background check, besides the employment screening. You count on companies like us to apply that filter and to say, okay, what's legal and consistent? What do we need to screen out? What do we need to keep you from seeing? Because, for example, you don't want to see dismissed records. You don't want to see an old bankruptcy from 12 years ago. You absolutely can't help yourself but to have a little bit of something in the back of your mind saying, well, I don't want to hire that person, and then that causes it to be less than objective in the hiring process. So, you know, just basic rule of thumb: if you can't use it, you don't want to see it, and to you know, place a best practices approach to everything it is that you do in your screening program. You know, that's really what we focus on and what we have focused on for the last 20 years is to ensure that everyone has the benefit of our experience and the benefit of our viewpoint of best practices and a bit conservative approach to the background screening process.
Looks like we're coming to the top of the hour here. Does anybody else have any questions that want to be answered? You can go ahead and type them in that box there. I know we didn't touch every, you know, state, but if you have any questions about any state laws or anything like that, we could certainly answer them, or any questions about any background check products or you know, how to use any records, we could certainly answer that. Also, I think after the presentation's over, there's going to be a slide asking you if, you know, you want to get any more information on background check or drug testing services from Point HR. If you sign up there, we also have a compliance guide that we can share with you as well. Looks like we got a question here from Sherry saying that they're a copy of the presentation. I believe they're going to send off a copy of a video copy of this presentation after it's over here. You'll get that by email, and there'll also be a copy here on Point HR's YouTube channel that'll be public as well, that you can access if you look for Point HR on YouTube. But yeah, if there's no other questions, I guess that pretty much does it. Anything in summation, Jim?
No, thanks so much for taking your time and attending. You know, we like to think that we're the best in the world at background screening. We've had probably more time in service than any other company out there that's left. You know, throughout the years, everything's changed, and we try to stay on top of everything to our clients' benefit. So we're very diligent in the things we do, and certainly appreciate you all taking your time today to come in and listen to what we had to say.
For sure.